Hi all on Play Chess and also streaming to YouTube. I'm just going to say hi and on stream. I've got to say this week I'm a bit snivelly actually at the moment, so I'm thinking not to do a Xmarth game, but to do a more topical game, kind of easier to find actually, from the Tata still, which I haven't actually checked out on my channel up till now. So I thought it's an opportunity that there are some interesting games at Tata still, but I think we might just be going for one or two max tonight, because this might be shorter than usual, because as I say, I think I've got a bit of a cold, so please excuse that. It's probably not totally evident yet from my voice, but okay, I might be keeping it a bit shorter than usual. But there was an interesting game I like to go over. So very recent, just hot off the press, Magnus Carlsen against Wojtaszek. Okay, let's have a look at this. I'm going to with Livebook, connect to Livebook and add a Kibitzer as usual. So this is a very interesting encounter. I mean, Wei is the up and coming Chinese chess prodigy. So yeah, let's see what happens in this game. Magnus kicked off with e4, and we have e5. And in fact here, knight f3 is very, very popular, and they say there's an old Tarashism, knights before bishops. Bishop c4 is actually the second most popular that was played, but knight f3 is by far the most used move. But bishop c4, so a little bit maybe of a surprise weapon. Oh, sorry, I put the wrong year in the in the YouTube title. I'm going to change that now. Pardon me. That should be changed if you refresh it. Thank you on stream for mentioning that. So bishop c4, and we saw actually Wojtaszek playing knight f6. Now d3, c6. Quite often knight c6 is played. c6 was played, and the bishop drops back, so maybe in advance of d5 it gives white some more options to think about, rather than having to react immediately to d5. For example, white could let's go back to the game. Knight f6 was played, in fact. I told you I've got a cold. d3, protecting the pawn. c6, okay, so far so good. The bishop didn't retreat here. The bishop did not retreat here. You might think the bishop could retreat. This is actually a Livebook move, to retreat the bishop. It's the second most popular. In fact, knight f3 was played. Right, hitting e5. And d6 now, protecting the pawn. You might think, why not d5? d5 has been played before. For example, with bishop b3. This is quite interesting, I think. And the theory goes bishop d6 actually. If d takes, I think white's meant to be better after knight g5, hitting f7. White's getting a small edge here. So this is, she just takes here with a small edge. Even if he's a temporarily material down, that's good for white. He's not material down, it's just better structurally anyway. So okay, knight f3, d5 is possible and has been played before. d6 much rarer actually. Often also bishop e7 is another move, because there's a little trap here. If knight takes e5, then there's queen a5 check, hitting the knight. So actually this move, bishop e7, sets a little trap, like a reverse. Well, it's a trap like anyway, it's a little trap but white could just castle, and then we have d6. But we go a different route. We have d6 immediately here. Castles, bishop e7. Bishop drops back. Castles. c3, as if to construct a centre with d4 soon. Knight bd7. Rook e1. Knight c5. And just like in the Gokyo piano, just like in the Royal pairs, the bishop isn't maintained here for a moment. Bishop c2, that's quite a priority to maintain the light square bishop. Okay, bishop g4, pinning, knight bd2. There is a slight downside of the pin. It can be a subject of tempo game potentially. That has to be borne in mind when playing this pin here. We see after knight e6, in fact, h3, the bishop does go to h5, doesn't take on f3, but now knight f1, the bishop might be subject to further harassment with g4, maybe knight g3. It could actually be stuck on in a bad spot at g6, pushed to a bad spot. It's if black relinquishes the light square bishop, I don't think this is very good. Queen takes. It's actually slightly better for white on the light squares. So knight d7. Black is trying to, I believe, slightly weaken, if possible, white on the dark squares, because any structure like this is going to be a bit weaker on the dark squares. We see with knight d7, g4 is played. Knight g3. It's here. Yeah, black really wants to maybe exchange off these bishops somehow, and the prelude knight g5 is played here. And black would probably, I assume, welcome a standard move in this position, like knight takes g5. I think this would be black wouldn't mind this at all. Bishop takes g5, trying to exchange off the dark square bishops. Okay, so but this actually, surprisingly, and this is the first little twist here in this game, after knight g5, in fact, Magnus gives up voluntarily his dark square bishop, keeping the knight. Now, when you give up the dark square bishop like this, quite often, yeah, okay, there's a very good reason to give the opponent the bishop pair, usually. And there might be here a kind of interesting reason that actually, with the knight maintained, clearly there's pressure on e5. I mean, it does seem a dangerous thing to do, because, for example, the f4 square looks kind of lucrative for black, but there is more pressure on the center now with d4. So he plays d4, pressurizing e5. But hasn't he just given the bishop pair? The engines have this position as, well, about equal actually at the moment. Bishop f4. So it is actually a very interesting decision to give the opponent deliberately the bishop pair like this. But another factor, of course, is that this bishop in this position is still very hemmed in. I mean, what would it? It's really hemmed in. Is it going to like come out later like this on this diagonal somehow? So yeah, it's a very interesting configuration. Giving that bishop pair is adding some energy, some pressure to the center. We have knight e2, queen f6, still holding on to the dark square pressure. King g2, so holding on to f3. So white is ready at some point for knight takes f4. I don't think black can maintain his bishop even if he wanted to. Black actually some people think this is strange. Black conceded the center a bit with e takes. Let's see, if bishop h6, yes, it's prone to squishing with h4. and if it has to go back, this is better for white. That bishop gets squished instead. So it's difficult to really retreat that bishop. What is white actually threatening, though? It seems this position did induce a slight, maybe a panicky decision on black's part to give up the centre, because I think you might agree that this looks a bit strange to give that central control. E takes d4. Yeah, if h5, this might be technically one of the best ideas, trying to undermine the pawn chain. Let's see, knight takes. White tries to get the queens off. I think this should be okay for black, but black still has that hemmed in bishop. Yeah. Even this line, this is like sharp. And white's got a g-file initiative here, potentially, or just king g4 to get the pawn soon. That's an interesting line. But anyway, we have this concession. It seems like a concession, giving up some central control. How does white want to take back here? Or does he want to take the bishop? Taking the bishop is a move as well. But actually he did take on d4. If he plays c takes, let's have a quick look at c takes. I don't think, okay, this is not too terrible, but Magnus actually took with, I think, the much better decision, in fact, taking with the knight. So the knight can potentially use this f5 square, but also we've got potential pressure on d6. If this is actually taken away, then d6 is going to be more vulnerable, maybe, in the short term. We have rook f. Okay, what is the actual threat, though, here? If it's white to play... Not yet. There's no major threat here, I think. Okay, we have rook fe8. This is taken off now. Queen takes. And in fact, just f3. So, yes, there's a wall put for that bishop. And can black actually break this barrier to energize the bishop? Or can black use the e5 square? There's a few questions here. Let's just rule something out. Black played knight b6. If... I think d5 seems plausible. But let's have a look. E takes. C takes. Take. There, of course, there's a nice laid pawn, but is that a big deal? There's a nice blockade. Maybe it's slightly. Apparently, technically, it's a little bit better for white. I think that's a plausible move to play d5 here. You'd think anyway to try and liberate this bishop a bit. c5 is also something to consider, but that bishop still, it doesn't look great hemmed in, and this structure doesn't look great. But maybe black can play for knight b6 d5 there. Okay, so it's a tricky position. We see knight b6 though. So what is actually happening here? Queen c1. Now, if the queen refuses the exchange, if there's a refusal, in fact, I think f4 is going to be more dangerous now, threatening to squish the bishop immediately with f5. That's actually horrible. And queen e5 just walks straight into f4. So not too many choices here which seem palatable. Queen takes c1, rook takes, and yeah, white still has what seems to be a nice advantage here at the opening. And now d5 provoking e5 which is played. So we have, although we have the exchange of bishops, which does sort out black's problem there, what we have now, though, in return, white seems to have a nice pawn mobility, and you'll see this pawn majority 4-3 over here, with a nice knight on d4. Of course, the knight. Actually, this didn't even happen. Bishop takes c2. That's on the event of bishop takes c2. That would be very nice. The pawn majority, but this is the thing to use anyway. Knight d7 was played, and here this pawn majority is made use of. f4. So threatening immediately to squish the bishop with f5. Black hasn't got too many palatable options. I think this is a bit ridiculous to play this. Be squished. Knight f3. That's a big positional, position for white. So bishop takes here. Takes. Knight c5. Black is trying to at least occupy the e4 square. Is that a stable outpost though? We see rook e3, rook 88, and the king comes to sort of put pressure on that e4 square as well. The knight does go there anyway, and it seems as though, yes, with c5 and maybe d4, this looks promising. c5 is ruled out with the move b4. Discouraged. g5 now is played, which seems a little bit anti-positional. Although it's undermining centre here, it's giving that f5 square. But there's another concern about this position, is that this knight is a slight tactical vulnerability here. A slight tactical vulnerability. It's actually undermines, despite it seems white's centre under a little bit of pressure. White undermines the knight with c4. Yeah, the king is, or rook is ready to take on e4 on takes. We can take with either, right? So now, in response to this, there's a crazy response. c5. Let's see if instead of c5 for a moment, g takes, king takes. What is white actually threatening? I think white's play would revolve around knight f5 here. So this didn't happen, but I think white has knight f5 in view, which is very aggressive. As an example, let's try and give an example. Knight f5. Yeah, and white can just maybe play like this. The e5 pawn is quite stable here, and white can actually maybe just build up and build up. Just to give an idea, maybe even g6. Yeah, this pawn could be mobile, or h6, or this. Let's have a look at this. It looks pretty unpleasant. The knight is just a viability there. It's actually cut off from c5, d6, f6. It's cut off on every single square, basically. It's just the victim, and white is now threatening to take it off via knight takes d5. That's just an example. Okay. It's interesting, this liability knight. So anyway, yeah, g takes, it doesn't seem to get anywhere. So to sum that up, king takes, there will never be doubling rooks because the knight's going to go to f5 to stop the doubling on the e pawn. Meanwhile, the knight's kind of surrounded and trapped in the centre there. So actually we see c5 being played, knight b5, and it looks pretty unfortunate here for that knight. we have G takes f4, king takes f4. I don't know, it's kind of trapped. The knight's kind of trapped in the centre of the board. I don't know how to really. I haven't really seen an example of this. It's quite like this before, but the knight does seem to be fairly trapped and just being undermined. Okay, and there's another problem here, which, although black can seemingly try to do this resource c takes b4, this is what happened. For c takes d5, to be able to hit this knight, Whitey resigned here. The thing is, if he takes like this, hitting this knight, White doesn't want to take here because of rook takes b5, but White has, of course, knight c7 instead now, forking the rooks. So actually, it doesn't seem as though, yeah, the knight has actually been trapped. Now, it can go there. That is one possibility. So let's follow this. Knight takes. Now, if the pin, let's rule this out. d6. I mean, this is crushing, threatening d7. If takes, pick any rook. This is absolutely winning because of d7 and rook c8. So that's actually not helping to go knight c3. Yeah. So yes, this is just hopeless. If rook d4, okay, just take this off, or to even take the knight, the rook. Oh, quite an interesting game, but yeah, it's after c takes d5 weight, he resigned. What do you guys think of this game on stream? I could try and go over another game, maybe, if you want. Let's try for a bit. Okay, and then that'll be it. Magnus Carlsen's other game, which is of interest in this tournament. So against Wojtaszek, well, I think he was mad at from the rapid. He should have won this game and he managed to lose it. Let's have a look at the Wojtaszek game. Radoslav Wojtaszek. How do we actually pronounce his name? Does any pronunciation help at chessgames.com? Nope. Okay. Not yet. Okay, this is actually a really complicated game, and let's have a look at it anyway. Let's have a quick look. E4 for Magnus. So this is in round 2. This is on the 15th. C5. We have a Sicilian. Open Sicilian. And I think this is a prepared line by Magnus. He actually plays a weird looking move here, which is way down the list. I mean, 25 games in Live Book. What do you think's way down the list? I don't know if anyone's seen this game. Okay, I'm not going to ask, but I'm just going to show you. It's way down the list. A3. Yeah, there was a trend, I think, in for A3 to be trendy in some sort of, or A4 to throw A3 and A4 into trick opponents in openings. This looks like a very, very strange move, trying to get a nice favourable transposition somewhere. Yeah. It's sometimes used in the poison pawn lines to try and trap the queen if the pawn actually is taken with knight a4, because it takes away the b4 square. Let's see how black reacted to this e5. This has been played before, and in fact the knight lunges into f5 here. We have d5, which seems logical to try and undermine the f5 knight. Bishop g5, d4, that's taken. White gets nice knights for the moment, and they look a bit unsafe though, because black's threatening to take and then take. So one of them is supported with queen g4. So again, in fact, Magnus is, in this game, is giving the bishop hand to the opponent, but there's good ideas behind it. One idea I think we should check out is, why can't black, say, do g6? In fact, there's a move here, queen g3, hitting e5, and the rook will be hanging. It all takes, I think we just take and then take the rook. So it's not that straightforward to try and refute this queen g4. We have actually bishop takes f5 being played, which leaves that impressive knight on d5. Bishop d6. Now h4, with an idea that rook h3, rook g3 is interesting if black dares castle. Knight c6. Bishop c4. And one virtue of a3, of course, is a ready-made pigeonhole, and that's actually used here. Well, nearly, sorry, it's not used yet. It doesn't go all the way back to a2, it goes to b3. Actually, while on that subject, why not go to a2? I think there's nothing wrong with going to a2, particularly. It doesn't seem as though that's a huge problem either. But the bishop goes to b3. We have knight e7, queen g4, black castles, there's the castle, now rook h3, so this looks pretty direct. This is the sort of funny stuff I get up to in Blitz sometimes, just rook h3 to g5, I think it's a lot of fun. So yes, Magnus Carlsen has clearly looked at my strange Blitz games and concluded, yes, this is a really good manoeuvre. Course. Rook h3 to g3. Okay, yeah. Oh, pardon me. Rook h3. Okay, so knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. The position here is stable, though. It's about equal. Even though, yeah, white does seem to have the upper hand, the more aggressive bishop. It is actually pinning something. Black's bishop is not doing anything. So, from an engine perspective, this is about equal. Okay, the rook moves. Rook g3. It's scary for black though, a little bit. Queen f6. And then we see the move a4. Trying to, well, threatening immediately a takes b, actually. And if b4, that's a nice grip, I think, for white on the light squares. That would be pleasant enough on the light squares, or b takes is nice enough for white. So actually, black played check first anyway, and did actually take on a4. And again, it still seems stable enough because black, this bishop's not that easily kicked without penalty. We have, well, structurally, it'll be fracturing white's pawns, even though the rook's pointing to c3. It's not. I don't think it's a great move necessarily. Let's have a quick look. White played rook a1. If c3, yeah, bishop just perches itself on c5. In fact, it's no big deal to do that. We have rook a1, rook c7. Bishop b3, and the bishop's no longer controlling a8. Actually, that's used now, the a8 square. King g1, manually castling. Okay, bishop f8, queen h5, with the threat now potentially of rook f3, putting some more pressure on f7. Potentially g6, kicking the queen. Rook a6, we have h5, queen f4, Queen goes back. Queen f6. Bit of a dancing set of manoeuvres. Queen b5 now, though. And here, yeah, the queen's... Yeah, it's strange that the queen's gone maybe to the queen side, you might think. What is the actual threat? I believe, actually, rook f3 might be a concern. A concern here, because, yeah, if there, then there's rook f7, and also the queen's looking at e5. Black may have made a significant, apparently a significant mistake here. Black played queen c6, which visually, of course, loses that centre pawn. What else, though, is possible? Rook c5 might be possible, apparently. And keep kicking the queen. There's an interesting line here, which is actually in white's favour, which is hg. G takes his mating. And yeah. Also, sorry. Let's have a yeah, I think that was the end of that one. To show that one, but hg. This is uncomfortable for black. This position, but not. It's not losing a pawn. That's the thing I wanted to mention. I mean, that's the thing I wanted to see, investigate here. In the game continuation, black loses the e5 pawn. Okay, what did he have in mind? Okay, so that's actually taken. Immediate counter pressure on e4, perhaps. The thing is, after queen f4, we're back to the pressure points. f7, g6. Clearly, these are pressure points on black. Can black actually afford to take the pawn on e4? I would have thought not. Let's see. Black played a4. If queen takes e4, I think we just play either bishop takes, because the rook's overloaded here. We take the queen, and this is actually good for white as well, because actually there's a new target here maybe coming up, as well as yeah, there's going to be a new target when black has to move the rook. Okay, but black didn't take that on e4 with the queen. It's too overloaded. Yeah, bishop f7 is good. What black did do was play a4, giving white trying to actually go for this pawn instead of this one. So bishop d5 perhaps. But the queen actually retreated to c7. Now in this case, on queen takes c2, rook c1 is strong, it seems. Queen takes b2, rook c8, pinning that bishop with the threat of queen h6. This is no good. There's too many pins on black in this position. Too many, by far. For example, d3. Yeah, black has to. Yeah, it's virtually impossible to play this. The engine line is trying to survive. It's giving up a rook for d2. Still the exchange up here. Bet of winning for white. So anyway, taking on c2 in a nutshell is probably not a good idea. We have queen c7 because it leads to pins. You don't really want to have horrendous pins. So Magnus is a pawn up. Yes, he's a pawn up now. Officially. But it's opposite colour bishops. Can black actually hold this? It seems very passive at the moment. That bishop seems much more passive. White's bishop is in an ideal spot here, it seems. In fact, Okay, so what happened here? Queen b6, rook a2 protecting b2, rook f3 putting more pressure on f7, queen e2 hitting the rook on a6, hg, g3 preparing maybe king g2 and use the h file at some point. In fact, the king does go there, away from the dark squares, of course. It's a good policy as well of the dark square bishop. Rook d7, queen d1. And yeah, there might be some h file usage possibilities coming up. For the moment, rook f6. That's taken. Actually, this might be a hastening to the end. Rook f6 in this position. What is white actually threatening? Anyway, maybe white doesn't need to immediately threaten anything. So rook f6. It seems to okay, be a big problem now because the king is more exposed. We have c3. D takes, rook takes a4, and it's here at move 44 that black resigned. The king does seem very exposed. Let's see what is going on here. If rule out some basics stuff. If takes, this is a forced mate with check and queen h8. Threatening queen h4 mate. If bishop h6, check, takes. It's actually a fourth mate. Threatening mate in 2. Yeah. The king is far too exposed here. It's end of the game because of king safety, basically. Yeah, it seems rook f6 is maybe wasn't the best, bringing the king here. Once the king's there, this diagonal is lethal. Magnus actually gained access to this diagonal after rook f6. Yeah, because he's nudging the queen away from d4 to get this check in. Just to show that bit more detail here, d takes here. If we try and stay on this diagonal with queen takes c3, and there's different problems now. Queen takes a4, hitting the rook. I think the problem is we can still go on this diagonal via a1, rook c2. We go via potentially a1. Here I think now we take the rook. Here we can just get on the diagonal via d4 or a1 either, and then stop. It's just forced mate. Threatening rook h2 there. So yeah, it seems that doesn't help. This position doesn't help. If the king tries to crawl back, well, the rook's hanging. The rook's hanging. Rook here. Queen e8 then is probably the most painful. Hitting the bishop. If the bishop moves, queen d8 check. That's stupid to move the bishop there. If the bishop moves here, we have queen h8 check. With queen h4 mate. No, this position is tricky to say the least after c3. This is, I don't know. Black seems to be completely busted after this. The king's too exposed. So if we have to rewind here. This is not a good place to be after rook f6 with the king popping out there. I think black's best might have been rook, or even just putting the king back in the box. it's passive. It's passive, but is it like lost immediately? White can still actually, even with the king there, White can still use this idea to win a4, that a4 pawn. It's not immediately lost. It's better for White. Okay, so maybe Wojtaszek was feeling guilty about the World Rapid Championship where he should have beaten Keryakin. Is that it? Is this the same Wojtaszek? Why am I confusing that? Wasn't this the guy Magnus Carlsen was complaining about ruining his tournament? Okay, so anyway, whatever. So those are two games which are decisive from Tata still from Magnus Carlsen that I wanted to show you. Okay, I hope you got something out of them. Sorry it wasn't so interactive this week. I'm just gonna call it day here. Okay, have a good week. Comments, questions, likes, appreciated on YouTube. Thanks very much.